Now, the Moseneke report into local government elections suggested that the local government polls would not be free and fair due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It was also said that it would be conducive to holding free and fair elections, or rather it would not be conducive to holding free and fair elections. Among other things, he raised the risks associated with large political gatherings while campaigning. And this is something that we have seen over the past few days with various political parties launching their manifestos. We've seen more than the prescribed 500 people gathering at an exterior venue. But for more on the Moseneke report, as well as what we're seeing now during the run-up to November the 1st, we're joined by Dr. Aslam Dasoo of the Progressive Health Forum. Dr. Dasoo, a very good afternoon to you, and good to have you with us on the Daytime Update. Now, you were approached to give some quote-unquote expert medical and scientific opinion by the Mosaic Inquiry. What was your stance?
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me. I was one of many people who gave input, people with scientific background, and the overall theme was pretty much the same from everybody, that we are in a situation where we have come off the third wave, and that is all well and good. However, this virus and this pandemic, we know, comes in surges, and the surges are usually preempted by a lot of movement and a lot of gatherings and a lot of spread of the virus, so that you get outbreaks and perhaps even a new wave. Our view at the time was that we currently have about 8.5 million people fully vaccinated. And this is out of a target population of about 40 million adults. By the end of October, that's just a month away, that will go up to 10 million, perhaps 12 million, but there is reduced uptake now, and I know that that's a concern in the vaccination drive. The important point to make about that is that with that low rate of vaccination, there will be a corresponding increase in infection when there is greater movement as political activity increases before the elections. We saw yesterday a number of rallies where there was very little adherence to the protective measures we all know, and we don't know how many of those people were even vaccinated. So, and as we get closer to the election, we can expect more of this. I don't think the problem is on the election day itself, except for transportation issues, but venues, the IEC, I think, has got a handle on and will conduct things in a safe manner. But it's the period leading up to it that will increase infection. We're expecting a fourth wave at the end of November, beginning of December. That may well change depending on the amount of transmission that takes place now, given the low amount of vaccination. Let me just end by saying that by the end of February, when Justice Moseneke recommended that the elections be moved to, there will have been a correspondingly higher number of people vaccinated. So what we will now have is a greater number of deaths compared to the end of February, because we will have had many more people vaccinated and being protected against severe disease and death.
Are you saying then that, Dr. Dasoo, because of the run-up and the lead-up to the elections, we could start experiencing the fourth wave a whole lot sooner than the end of November, perhaps in the next couple of weeks?
Well, perhaps not as soon as that. But I do think that, the projected time for the emergence of the fourth wave is at the end of November, and it may well be sooner than that, given the process of the hustings at the moment, and the elections itself will be happening, during the month of October up to November the 1st. We will then 2 weeks later see, the effect of all of this movement and possible transmission, coming out as the beginning of a new wave. There's no certainty about this, but there is a logic to understanding how these things work. And our proposition to the Moseneke Commission was very simple, that by next year we will have more people vaccinated, so we'll have less people at risk. So it's an ethical issue for us, as health workers and medical scientists and so on, about what is the tolerable number of people dying. You know, the politicians are very focused on winning their elections. One understands that. But I think the relegation of the biology of this pandemic is a real problem. They didn't quite grasp that. They could have delayed the election, but they chose not to, you know, and I think we must now live with the consequences of that.
The Constitutional Court did not comply with the recommendations that were made by the Moseneke inquiry. Give us perhaps what you believe the repercussions of that could be.
Okay, I think the Constitutional Court acted entirely within its remit. The Constitutional Court cannot change the Constitution, and the Constitution requires the election to be held at a certain point. And they basically just told the IEC that you must follow the law, and I think they were absolutely correct. If you wanted to postpone the election, you would need a constitutional amendment, and that could only occur in Parliament. Now, you know, for whatever reason, this didn't happen. The IEC didn't go to Parliament. The parliamentarians didn't come together on this matter. And I think we must be careful for what we wish. They wanted this election to go ahead as soon as possible. And I understand the anxieties and the tensions politically around these local government elections. Nevertheless, on a cold, hard, clinical look, these elections will cause greater transmission. It's as simple as that. And what if it was held next year, there would also be transmission. That is a given. But if we had more people protected by next year, the consequences of that transmission would be much less. I think that the political establishment let us down here, and all of the parties are responsible for that.
Is it, Dr. Dasoo, the political establishment, or is it the IEC themselves? As you mentioned, this didn't end up in Parliament, which would have been the logical place for it to go after the Constitutional Court ruling.
It's what we expected, that it would go to Parliament. I don't think Justice Moseneke gave guidance on where the IEC should take the issue, and the IEC, in its wisdom, decided to go to the Constitutional Court. And I think they are best positioned to explain why they did that. But once that happened, it was clear to many of us that the Constitutional Court will only act within the remit of the Constitution, which is exactly what they did. Told the IEC, you have to hold the elections. That is the law. Go and obey the law. And so the IEC can perhaps explain that, but clearly the politicians should have invited the IEC to come to them. They should have been engaged in the issue. It's not as though they didn't know anything about it. They knew months ago that this may be a possibility. But, you know, politics being what it is, and it's very self-centered and very selfish, as always, and this is the outcome right now. That's why I say the political establishment in our country has failed the people on this pandemic. We are now stuck with this. It is what it is. We will live with the consequences of it. But I think the citizens of the country have a right to know that the political establishment did certain things that may not have been in their interest, and they can act accordingly.
Dr. Dasoo, was the entire Moseneke inquiry a waste of time? Was it a necessary exercise?
I think it was a very necessary exercise. We are a constitutional democracy, and I think what the IEC did was absolutely correct when people raised concerns about holding the elections now. They got an eminent jurist to interrogate the issue, and Justice Moseneke did an excellent job doing that. He invited commentary and information from a wide range of sources, and if you read his judgment, it's impeccable, you know, or his recommendations, they're pretty clear. And I think it was at that point that the powers that be, not just the IEC, should have grasped the nettle. And I think people don't quite understand, even now, just what a difficult situation this pandemic leaves us in. Because if this wave emerges earlier than expected, right through the December period, And given our low levels of vaccination, and one hopes that there's no new variant in the offing, this could be, another terrible impact on the country and on the people. And I think that should have been the first concern, not maintaining a position that will secure political jobs, which is what these elections are all about. And it's really about a question of values here and ethics, as I said. And we are quite clear that ethically we must do whatever we can to avoid people getting infected and avoid people getting into hospital or dying. And that's really the only operating principle here. The elections could well have been postponed without too much damage to the constitutional order, in fact with no damage, if all of the parties had come together in Parliament to approve that, even on a temporary basis.
Dr. Dasoo from the Progressive Health Forum, thank you very much for your insight and that perspective. That conversation in the light of the campaigning and electioneering that is currently taking place. We are seeing increased number of people gathering together and many not adhering to any of the COVID-19 protocols. What then does this mean for South Africa and its fight against the COVID-19 virus?